Romans chapter 3. The beginning part of this chapter is definitely one of the more challenging parts in regards to understanding. But nevertheless, let us go in verse by verse and see what the Word of God here is teaching. So up until now, we've been concluding that Jews and Gentiles, they've all sinned, and that it's not about being circumcised or being a Jewish person and then being anti-God. And Paul concluded that it's the inward Jew, the one that from the heart is doing the will of God, is accepted and would have praise of God. So in chapter 3, verse 1, what advantage then hath the Jew, or what profit is there of circumcision? So it's natural then that that a Jew would then ask that question. If it's not the circumcision that's making us right with God, then what profit does it have? I think we already know the answer to that. The circumcision was a sign of something that was supposed to be in the heart, but obviously wasn't. But Paul says, as far as being Jewish people, there is an advantage. In verse 2, much every way, chiefly because that unto them were committed the oracles of God. So Paul believes that there is an advantage to being a Jew. Chiefly, for the most part, the biggest advantage that the Jewish people had was that unto them were committed the sayings, or the oracles, the words of God. The words of God came through these people, God's people. Then it says in verse 3, for what if some did not believe? Shall their unbelief make the faith of God without effect? So then he's telling us here, what if some of those Jews that were speaking, that had been committed the oracles of God, what if these Jewish people did not believe God's promises? What if these Jewish people did not fulfill their calling? And he says, shall their unbelief make the faith or faithfulness or purposes of God without effect? It's understandable that they would ask this question. Then he says, verse 4, God forbid. Yea, let God be true, but every man a liar, as it is written, that thou mightest be justified in thy sayings, and mightest overcome when thou art judged. So the answer is very clear, God forbid. Even if every single man on earth was lying, God would still be true in the things that he has said. And it says that thou mightest be justified in thy sayings, that God will one day, before all humanity or all mankind, will he be justified, will he be declared that he was right all along, and will be overcome when he's judged. At the end of the day, on the last day, before the new heaven and new earth, there will be again an army round about from all corners of the world come against New Jerusalem, and God will rain fire from heaven and destroy them. And at the great white throne, all the secrets of men will be revealed, and it will be declared that God was right all along. He says in verse 5, but if our unrighteousness commend the righteousness of God, what shall we say? Is God unrighteous, who taketh vengeance? So, I speak as a man. He's saying I'm just giving a carnal example, but that's what he's saying when he says, I speak as a man. I'm just going to give a carnal example. If we in our unrighteousness are lifting up God, because before he was talking about how if a person would believe themselves to be righteous, meaning believe themselves to be Jewish people, and speak against God, would their speaking undo what God has said? And he said, no. Now he's saying the opposite. He says, okay, now what if we are unrighteous and we are lifting up, we're commending the righteousness of God? What shall we say? Is God unrighteous who taketh vengeance? If God would then take vengeance upon that person, would he be unrighteous? Because that person is commending the righteousness of God. He's lifting up. He's saying that God is true, God is real. And there's probably lots of people in this world that believe that there is a God, and they might even be sincerely trying to, out of their best knowledge, to honor him by being good to people, by being good to creation, by being good to their neighbor, their wife, their child, or whatever it be, in the spirit of wanting to please the higher power. But they themselves are not seeking to be justified by Christ. They themselves are not seeking, or they're rejecting the Christ, the cross, the blood. They're rejecting the thought that they themselves are still a sinner. But they are commending God, even though they might not be commending the right God, but they are lifting up. If an unrighteous person would lift up the righteousness of God, what shall we say? Would God be unrighteous who would take vengeance upon that man? I speak as a man, I'm speaking carnally, but it says, God forbid. For then how shall God judge the world? As the world, in some sense, is exactly that. There is wicked people in this world, but in the general sense, the world probably upholds that man should not hurt another man, that we should love one another, and that we should be responsible with the things that are given to us. And if God had to hold back his judgment because someone was commending righteousness, then he would not be able to judge the world. In a general sense, he would not be able to judge the world, for everyone in some sense is upholding truth. In the earlier part of Romans, we even read that by nature they were accusing or else excusing. That is, by nature, lifting up righteousness and condemning unrighteousness. Verse 7, For if the truth of God hath more abounded through my lie unto his glory, why yet am I also judged as a sinner? So he's still speaking carnally. He's saying, now if I, as an unbeliever, if the truth of God hath more abounded through my lie, if I, as a wicked person, and am outside of God, against God, but yet the truth of God is being revealed through me still, why am I yet then still judged as a sinner? If I'm commending the righteousness of God as a liar, as a wicked person, why am I yet judged as a sinner? And he says, verse 8, And not rather as we be slanderously reported, and as some affirm we say, let us do evil that good may come, whose damnation is just. So some people are actually reporting that the Jewish people were actually saying these types of things. Let's do evil that good may come. Let's do evil that we might maybe push or speed up the righteousness of God, the return of Christ to the return of God to judge the wicked. Verse 9. Well, and someone that says something like that, let us do evil that good may come, that person would justly deserve damnation. They would justly deserve the punishment. Verse 9, what then? Are we better than they? So are we Jewish people better than the Gentiles who said these things about us? Are we Jewish people in unrighteousness better than these Jewish people because we had the oracles of God and we, against our own knowledge and ignorance, were still promoting God in our unbelief and disbelief or unrighteousness, we are promoting God. Are we then better than they? He says, no. In no wise, not in any way. For we have before proved, both Jews and Gentiles, they are all under sin. That's what we did in the first couple of chapters. We were proving that the Jewish people, they had the written law of God, and they were disobedient to it. And the Gentile people, they had the law written on their hearts, and they were disobedient to that. So we have both before proved that we are all under sin.